We have so many corrupted institutions. Most people can recognize that the religious structure is corrupted. And thanks to people like Jaron, Mark Sargent, and many others who have brought forth some really interesting information about NASA and the NASA deception, the fake moon landing, a lot of people are losing faith in science as well. But can the two work together? And can we find the truth by unifying the two and uncorrupting them? Because religion and science both seem to be the opposite sides, the left hand and the right hand of the same beast. But it's a false dichotomy. It's a false paradigm. If you're into the religion, then you can't be into science because it contradicts your religion. And if you're into the science, then you can't be religious because the science contradicts the religion and vice versa. Johan Oldenkamp has developed holy science, which is the reunification of sane science and solid spirituality, as university science is mostly an insane belief named Scientism, while religious spirituality is a tenuous and, in all cases, serves as a misleading control system. It is Johan's life work to present holy science as the all-round and coherent paradigm for the further development of unbiased science and verifiability. Spirituality as two sides of the same coin. His website is pateo.nl, and his entirely English website is holyscience.org. Now that's holy science spelled WHOLLY, holyscience.org. And I think we have Johan on with us. Johan, how are you doing, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing fine, Chris. Thank you for inviting me.
Excellent. Thank you for joining us, especially as early as it is out there on the other side of the world. How are things on that side of the pond?
Yeah, it's a little bit early indeed. It's 5 a.m. here, but I'm more than happy to wake up early because I think it's important to reach out to my fellow humans in the USA.
Excellent.
Thank
Excellent. You. Well, you know, one of the things that really resonated with me with your work is the fact that you bring the two together, but first realize that both institutions, science and religion, are both corrupt. And that's exactly where I've come from in my journey. I've realized that they're both traps, and it's one box after another that you jump into, but you've kind of merged the two. So how did you get started on that?
Yeah, well, to be honest, I didn't merge the science as we find it at the universities, nor the spirituality as we find it in the religions. I went into the past and I tried to understand how in ancient times people looked at science and at spirituality, and it's mostly that which I integrated, reunited into a single whole. But of course, I looked at everything we can buy, so to say, at the universities, and what the religions also have to offer. But it's very important to see that there's a difference between esoteric religion and exoteric. Exo is the outside, and eso is the inside. And I think in all religions we find esoteric insights and truth. So when you look deep enough, you will find a lot of very valuable and interesting insights to integrate into the holy science. But you should not be confused by all the, can I use hard words? Yeah, all the bollocks you find on the outside, because they're mostly just to baffle people and to bring them in a state of obedience, because it's about reward and punishment and things like that. Well, true spirituality has nothing to do with those things. It's all about developing your consciousness to a higher level and start to understand how everything beautifully works together, and what you can do, what your role can be in that beautiful creation, that total creation.
Very well said. And I find it to be true that the further I get along my journey, the more I realize that it's really about going within myself. And I'm starting to come to the realization that we have all of the knowledge that ever existed embedded within our soul. And it's just a matter of remembering at this point. So it really is an esoteric idea. It's about going within.
Indeed, indeed. I see the soul more as a connection to the overall field of information, or knowledge as you like. And when we are connected in a pure way with our soul, then that antenna is working much more better, and then we're able to get much more information into us. But it is indeed a journey inside. But at the other hand, it's also a journey outside, and most people focus only on the inside, but that's not helpful either. At least in my case, it was important to also focus on what's happening on the world stage, and who are playing the main role here, and what is actually their game. What do they want to gain, and why do they fool us so much? And there's a reason for that as well. So to me, it's both inside and outside at the same time.
So what would you say is the biggest errors or mistakes with organized religion?
What I just mentioned before, the punishment and reward, that's actually a very simple control mechanism. And when people are falling for that, they think, oh, if I do all this, I get a reward afterwards in the next life or in heaven or wherever you think, then you're fooled big time, because there is no external reward. And on the other hand, there is no external punishment either. So that's the good news. All you can do is reward yourself. And you can reward yourself by breaking free from any belief system. Also, university science is actually a belief system, and those who are trying to break free from that are punished severely. Those heretics or the infidels. That's a big one. But that's true for all the religions, especially for the Judaic religion. Actually, the whole history, starting with the son of Abraham, the second son. I don't think the second son was ever born. He had only one son, and that was Ismael. And I think everything that followed from that is just fiction. It does not have any historic evidence at all.
Well, it's funny you mention that, because Ishmael is the bloodline that the Muslims go down.
Yeah, but we should. Okay, then I mentioned that as well. The visions, the so-called visions Muhammad had, in which all of Islam is based upon, they were, they're not pure. Either they were induced by some drugs, but the truth is he was 15 years under intensive training by the Vatican priests, the monks, and he was actually created. He was helped to create this kind of religion in order to serve the agenda of the Vatican, and that's what he did. Very good, because he was a very clever man. But the problem for the Vatican was that they created a monster, and that monster came completely out of control, and that's why they had to organize the Crusades to try to reduce that problem a little bit. But of course, they completely failed, and now we see the situation worldwide.
Interesting. Living in the West, I've always researched the Judaic Christian belief system. If I was in the Middle East, I would probably be researching Islam, but I haven't looked into Islam too much because it's not prevalent here. I mean, it is somewhat, but not in my personal life. But I just came across the information that the Vatican created Islam, just as you mentioned just a minute ago, and it's very synchronistic. Can you elaborate a little bit more on that? Because I am at the beginning of that journey. Yeah,
well, there is a former Jesuit.
Actually, I hate to do this. We've got the break hitting us. Let's pick it up on the other side, though. We'll go down the road of the creation of Islam by the Vatican right here on Truth Frequency. As I mentioned, Olden, I'm sorry, Johan, I haven't really looked too much into the creation of Islam. I always just thought it was people arguing with each other and not being able to agree on how to worship the invisible man in the sky that they all seem to think is there. But there's actually a more sinister agenda behind it. So please take us down that road.
Yeah, I was taken down that road myself by Mr. Alberto Rivera, and he's a former Jesuit. And the Jesuits are the most powerful organization on this planet right now. It started in about 1540, and since then they gained more and more power. But he spoke out, and he was killed for that. He was killed on 1997 on June the 20th, and he wrote the Prophet, and there he explains everything the Jesuits know about this creation. But we can also look at the facts for ourselves. Because when Muhammad was 25 years old, he was a brilliant young man. He married a 40-year-old woman who was married before twice, and she was a widow. And I married myself around that age, but I didn't marry a 40-year-old woman. So I'm not sure if any man is attracted by a woman who's 15 years older at that time of his life. And when we dig into the story a little bit deeper, her name was Kajia, and after she became widow for the second time, she decided to go back to the monastery and become a servant of God. Actually, she gave all her wealth to the Catholic Church, and she retired to a convent somewhere in what we now call Saudi Arabia. And that's a really remarkable story because after she gave up on life, so to say, the external life, and she went inside, as we talked about before. But then she was sent on a very strange mission, namely to contact this young man and actually to help him do what he had to do. So they married, and then her kind of faraway cousin, Baraga was his name, and he was also kind of faraway cousin by Muhammad themselves, so they were in a very distant way related as well. But anyway, he helped to interpret the message Muhammad got, but they were both Catholic, Roman Catholic. And what most people don't know is that after the marriage, which was in 595, Muhammad was intensively trained by Roman Catholic monks, and he was educated so much in that way of thinking that after 15 years he was able to create his own religion. But if you look at the content of the Quran, which was collected by a lot of his writings, then you can see clearly there is a lot of Catholic basis there. For instance, the Virgin Mary is present, and many other things as well. So it's very clear where he got it from. But his job was to create a new religion that was appealing to the Arabs, because they didn't like Roman Catholicism too much. They had to find a religion that was appealing to them, and he succeeded very good in that. Actually, he succeeded better than the Vatican wanted. So then they had to counterattack that as well. But that's in fact the main story.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible.
So what is the situation now? Is the Vatican working with the Islamic leadership, or are they still trying to exterminate them? Because it seems like we have a push to demonize them, while at the same time the Catholic Church seems to want to unify all the religions.
Yeah, that's indeed the main goal. But the current situation is that the leadership of Judaism, of the Islam, and of what is called Christianity, but I'll go into that later on, hopefully as well, because that's also based on a scam. They know their very dark and evil secrets, and so they can blackmail each other, and that's what they've done. So there's no way one of those three can expose the other ones, because then they're exposed as well. And maybe that's the big agenda behind it, that at the end people will realize all these three so-called religions were based on lies, and then people, of course, will lose their faith immediately. But then there will be a new unified religion, maybe openly acknowledging all the lies, but also offering a lot of new truth, and that might be really, really appealing, because the main goal of the powers that should not be is to create a single religion for every human being on this planet. And of course, that single religion is all about control, about reward and punishment. But that's what they want. So they want to play this game for a little bit longer until they maybe destroy each other. And then finally the solution will be there. It's problem, reaction, solution strategy, of course.
What do you see the new religion as? I would say that the new religion is atheism. Science is the new religion.
That's a possibility. But people need some kind of there must be some kind of magic into it, and what they've done since the 7th century is to remove all the magic from university science, which I prefer to call scientism, because it's actually also a belief system. So that's not really appealing to most people. When you are a student at the high school, then science is not really interesting, because it's dead, it's cold, it doesn't bring you any it doesn't make you warm, so to say. Only if you are a nerd, which I was a little bit, of course, I have to admit that. But it doesn't appeal the majority of the people. There has to be something warm, something beautiful inside. So I think they have to come up with something better than the science as it is now. Maybe it has to do with aliens. The exopolitic agenda might be an idea, that they come up and say, yeah, we are the ones who created human beings, so we are your gods. But you can call us now, don't have to call us God anymore. You can call us anything you want. But we're here to help you evolve, something like that. And I think that's the real plan.
Right, I totally agree. I think without the warm and fuzzies, then you have the French Revolution. And the French Revolution was just a terrible, bloody affair that didn't really accomplish much of anything after 10 or 15 years. And it was largely seen as a disaster. And the reason why that was because when you make reason your religion and give up all of the warm and fuzzies, then people don't have faith in anything when they're hungry or when they're cold or when they're tired and they don't want to keep going. They need something warm and fuzzy to keep them going.
Indeed, it's true.
Yeah.
But we should not forget that there is no revolution by accident. The French Revolution was completely organized by the Freemasons, but it was not in the interest of the Rothschild family, so they had to somehow counter it a little bit.
I completely agree, and I'm afraid that that's what we're seeing here in the United States. Everybody thinks that we're having a revolution or that they're going to go out there and revolt, but even if the revolution doesn't start out as staged or as part of the agenda, it will eventually fall into that. The only real revolution is a revolution of the mind. We'll be right back. We're back speaking with Johan Oldenkamp of holyscience.org. That's holy spelled WHOLLY, holyscience.org. And Johan, there was a question from one of our listeners, and they want to know if you have any insight into the meeting between the head of the Russian Orthodox Church and the Pope, which took place in Cuba.
No, but I have to admit that I don't always follow the mainstream news because there's so much disinformation there. But I didn't look at it. But the main story is that the Vatican is controlling also that part of what people call Catholicism or whatever. But they all play their own game because, as I said before, they they are very well aware of the dark secrets inside of these so-called religions, and they can use that for their own advantage. But it's all an egoistic game of gaining control over people and creating a better situation for yourself.
I agree. I haven't looked into it either. At this point, to me, it just seems like puppets just playing out a puppet show, and a bunch of silly people who dress up in white robes who think that those white robes somehow make them holy or spiritual or something like that. There's really no spiritual practice in religion. Now, you talked about Christianity being one of the biggest scams out there as well. Take us down that road, please.
Yeah. What most people don't know is there were no Christians until the start of the 3rd century. What people call Christians were actually believers in Mithras, and that was a religion that came over from ancient Babylonia or Sumer. That was there for long, but Rome conquered that region as well, not only the Near East but also the Middle East, and the soldiers and also the merchants came back from that. And they were very interested in that belief system because it was actually understanding the power of light or light consciousness. So that was very appealing and became really popular. And Rome had a big problem because the Vatican, which came on later, but the people in Rome who wanted to control the world, they are actually worshipping Saturn. It's a Saturnic priesthood. So they didn't want people to worship the sun. They they wanted to fool them. But that didn't work at all. So they tried all kinds of very harsh means. Yeah, exactly. Example like throwing them for the lions. But none of that really worked. So in the actually in the 4th century, the start of the 4th century, they finally realized that if we can't beat them, we should join them. So then suddenly it was allowed to be Christian, and actually later on it became the number one religion of the Roman Empire. But after that, the Roman Empire started to fall down, and they had no more soldiers to fight for them. So they created a new kind of power structure. They built monasteries all over the world, but especially the places where there were Jews and there were real Christians. And I don't like the word Christian too much because that's is a little bit manipulated, because when we look at the New Testament, you can still see the essence there, and that essence is actually Gnosticism, or you can call it Hermetic science, or any other word, but it's more science actually than religion. And people who take those stories literally, they think it's an historic account of what happened about 2,000 years ago. They are completely fooled by the Vatican, because that's what they want you to believe. But underneath that, it's actually a very clever way to tell the truth, because those stories were written down as it was very dangerous for people to get caught in let's say the 2nd century with writings about Mithras, about the light, about light consciousness. So instead of Mithras, they changed the name into Jesus, and they also Jesus actually, and they also wrote it down in Greek. So it was a little bit more difficult for Roman people to understand it, but of course they could learn Greek as well. But it's a metaphor, and they use the character to tell parables, to tell very secret, very coded messages. But if you look carefully at the parables in the New Testament, then you see it's very profound insight in the whole of reality, and those are the most beautiful parts. And Rome could not push that away. So what they did then was integrate it into a total system, including all the books from the Old Testament, and that was done somewhere in the 4th century. And from that moment on, Rome wanted to control what is called Christianity. When we look, for instance, at the books that were found in Nag Hammadi, the Nag Hammadi writings, that is actually authentic Hermetic science or Gnostic insights, not altered by the monks from Rome. But then it was translated into Coptic. But you can, if you retranslate it into a language that you understand, then you see it is unaltered, it's original. And what we find in the New Testament is not original anymore. It's it has been manipulated a little bit. And the truth is also for the Old Testament, because It's not about Judaism at all. Certainly not in the book Genesis. It all came from ancient Sumer, and those stories were written down on clay tablets about 5,000 years ago. And 2,500 years later, they were rewritten in Hebrew. But it has nothing to do with Judaic people. It's an ancient insight in the nature of our reality, and that is abused, as I would like to say it, by the Pharisees. They created their own religion out of that, but that's also counterfeit.
Well, that makes sense, and it really shines the light, no pun intended, on the Lucifer Satan connection. Because that's something that I've always wondered. Why did they go out of their way to demonize this Lucifer being who is essentially a light bearer, the bearer of the light? Well, if you go back, you realize that whenever a religion changes over, the new religion tries to demonize the god or the symbols of the previous religion, starting with the serpent and then demonizing Moloch, the bull, to bring in Judaism, and then demonizing more and more and more. And then you have Mithra worship, as you just mentioned, which is the light worship of the light, or the following of the light. And so they demonize the light by saying that Lucifer, the light bearer, turned into the Satan figure who is the adversary of the new religion.
Yeah, it's true, but we need to understand there was actually a real bull in heaven, because it was a comet. It was a very dangerous comet, and that was the planet as we now know it, Venus. Before Venus became a planet in a stable orbit around Helios, the sun in our solar system, she was a very dangerous comet, and when she was close by, she created a lot of mayhem and volcano explosions and so on.
I did not know that.
Yeah, and so she was called the bull in the sky, and what, for instance, Zacharias Sitchin calls Nibiru, that was also Venus when she was still a comet. So the people in ancient Sumer actually saw a heavenly bull with two horns, but actually the horns were on the backside. Doesn't really matter. And all the stories we know about killing the bull, that's also true, because the bull eventually died and became a beautiful light. And actually Lucifer is a reference to Venus when she is a light. She is the morning star, the light of just before the sun rises, or sometimes the evening star. But that's a beautiful light in the night sky, and especially in the morning before the sun rises, it's very dark, and then she looks like a beautiful princess in the sky, in the night sky. So all the religions are based on true things, but people don't know that anymore, and that's of course for a reason, because then you can fool people, and then you can tell them that's a kind of deity and they have to worship it, or they have to pay money in order to save their soul or whatever. That's the way to trick people.
Interesting. I did not know that. I want to touch upon the Venus bull connection, because I do know that Nibiru is always pictured as the winged planet. That's the way that Sitchin states. So fascinating. The big question, Johan, that I'm going to ask you on the other side is, does science back this up? Does science say that Venus was put into our orbit at one point in time? Don't go anywhere. On the topic of the planet Venus and the ancient belief, or the ancient observation of this comet which turned into a planet, the winged planet or the horned planet, the great bull in the sky. Johan, does science also back this up as well, or is this just a religious belief?
Well, my science certainly backs it up, because there are many facts showing this. But the point is, university and especially astrophysics still thinks that gravity is the main force keeping all the planets in their orbits, which is a big mistake. It's not gravity, it's actually electromagnetism, or electricity and magnetism working together. And as long as astrophysics does not recognize that, they will never understand the true dynamics in the universe.
I would agree with you, and that's been a topic on the show here recently. Everything you're saying is very synchronistic with a lot of the things that have been going on here on the show. But science has it completely and totally wrong. So What would you say are the biggest downfalls in terms of science?
Yeah, of course, it's the gravity-based astrophysics, as I just said, but also the limitation to our physical reality. For universities, only that which is physical exists. And that's a big mistake, because we all know there's more between earth and heaven, so to say. So there is a large portion of the reality that is not physical, but it's certainly there. Yeah, for instance, we have all kinds of emotions, feelings, which are not physical, but they're very real. And when we, for instance, go down to the level of subatomic reality, then we have to be honest and say we don't know if there is anything physical at all, because it's just energy going round in a very high speed, and it gives the impression of solidity, but that's just an illusion actually. So there is nothing, and all we see is an illusion, and that's what the ancient people from India also said. It's Maya. It's not really there. And that's what Holy Science explains. It says everything is a projection, just like Plato explained in his allegory of the cave. We see the shadows on the wall, but those shadows on the wall are created by something in front of those shadows. And the same is true for our reality. All that we call physical is created by something on the other side of the veil. And the biggest mistake by university in the 17th century was to cast out all that was related to that other side of the veil, like metaphysics or alchemy or astrology. They all suddenly decided that is not physical, that's not empirical, so we cannot deal with that any longer, and we cast it out, and that was a huge problem. And then later on, more in recent history, university became more and more addicted to money. And that was the whole game, of course, because now the one who pays for it gets the result. And I call universities professors actually intellectual prostitutes, because they are not looking for the truth. They are just pleasing their financiers, the people who finance their work, because they want to continue what they're doing. And now all university does is based on fear of losing the status or the finance or whatever. Actually, it is the emperor that has no clothes on, and only someone who's standing outside of the university world can realize that, because inside it looks very impressive. When we look at the formulas they use in for instance, physics, it looks very impressive to the layman's eyes. But if you are a little bit more educated, then you can see it's not really explaining anything at all. It's just describing in a very elegant way. I have to admit that, of course, but it's not explaining. And to me, true science is about finding explanations. And you can only find explanations for our physical world beyond the veil. So if you exclude that part, you can never find any real explanations. And that's the biggest problem. So I call university scientists, I call them journalists, because they're describing reality. They do not explain anything at all.
Well, it sounds like holy science is the answer. So can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, actually, holy science is the paradigm that will bring us out of this misery, because the universities, the so-called university science, has created more and more problem. When we look, for instance, at our health, people are very impressed with what you know already. But if we really look at how healthy people are, and your show is about that as well, if I listen to the in-between advents and so on, we are getting more and more unhealthy, not only physically, but also mentally and so on. So what did this bring us actually? We can look, for instance, at people who have less of all this information, and they seem to be much more happy. So what's going on here? So science is, of course, helping us a lot, but we need to add the other half. We need to add spirituality, because both are needing each other. They are two sides of the same coin. Spirituality without science is just fantasy, while science without spirituality is dead. It's lifeless. It's actually it's very unappealing. So we need to have living science, and that's why I call it holy science, because the other science is full of holes, and holy science with a W and a double L is the science of the whole, the science of everything, not only the physical reality but also the metaphysical reality. And I also include the source of everything. And the source, you can call it God or any word you like to use there, but the source has to be present there as well. So that's the fire in the metaphor of Plato, the fire in the allegory of the cave. And if we exclude the source, then we also are in trouble. So holy science is, to me, the only way out of the current problematic situation, and will help us to create real science and real spirituality where we really need it at this time in our development.
I completely agree. And have you ever seen the movie Equilibrium?
I think so. It's a Hollywood production, isn't it?
It is a Hollywood production, and it's about a society after World War III that rebuilds by getting rid of all human emotion. And they think that by injecting it's basically the equivalent of Prozac it directly into their jugular vein every day, that they're going to somehow escape their own feelings. And if they can escape their feelings, then there's no hate or warfare anymore. And there's no ambition that gets out of control because you don't really have any feelings about anything anymore. So any kind of artwork is just immediately destroyed. And, people that are accused of feeling, they call them sense crimes. They are just basically summarily executed. And the whole time that I'm watching this, I'm like, wow, this is how I see the scientists, like scientism scientists, as you would put it. They have tried to get rid of the negative aspects of being a human being, but at the same time, they've gotten rid of the good aspects of being a human being. And they've boiled it all down so much that now it's just a concentrated bag of meat that's walking around and just happens to have the evolutionary advantage of being able to talk.
Yeah. Now I remember I did see that movie, and it has a lot of parallels with 1984, of course, the book of George Orwell. But what I liked was the martial art parts in it, because I'm a martial artist and I enjoy that a lot. But you're absolutely right. They want to create a kind of clinical world in which they can have 100% control, because that's the main goal. They want to 100% control human beings in this reality, because they know that we are creators of our own reality. But they don't want us to create our own reality. They want us to be part in the creation of the reality they want. And as long as we are unaware and unconscious of our own creation capability, then we are serving their agenda. And Holy Science is showing us, no, you are actually in the center. You are God, or at least you can become one with God. And when you do so, then nobody has any effect on you anymore. And then you become truly free. So actually, Holy Science is the way to become free. Not by writing letters to any organization at all, but by going inside and understanding you are one with the creator of the whole of reality. And that's the only true liberation there is.
Excellent. We will elaborate on that in the next hour. Give us your websites one more time.
Yeah, I have an all English website. It's holyscience.org with WLL, holy. And I have a 10-lingual website. It's pateo.nl. Pateo means no longer hidden. And NL doesn't mean Netherlands to me, but it means natural logic.
Excellent. Ladies and gentlemen, don't go anywhere. We have hour number 3 coming up. And everybody on the Genesis Communications Network, if you want to catch hour number 3, head on over to truthfrequencyradio.com. Everybody listening live this evening, stay tuned. Commercial free with Johan Oldenkamp coming up in just a moment. And Johan, you talk about the parables in the Bible, particularly the one about the house built on the rock, which is out of the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 7. Can you take us down that road?
Yeah, I think that's a very important parable, because people, when they hear about it via Christianity, they think they need to have a kind of rock-based faith in the Lord Jesus or whatever. But actually, it's the very opposite, because building your house on rock is meaning to build your understanding on rock, meaning on facts or on something that is really logical, something that can be fact-checked. So that means that you 100% sure that it is true. That means building on rock. And all the other things which you are not 100% sure, but you assume it is true, or you think it is true, or you believe it is true, that is building on sand. And a wise man doesn't build on sand, because a wise man wants to know 100% certain that it is true. And that's what it's all about. So the parable is telling you, make sure that whatever you build your understanding upon, make sure that it is rock and not something that is soft, like something you believe in. So anyone who believes is actually building a house on rock, and anyone who knows for sure has built a house on rock. And that's what I also tell in my lectures, because I give a lot of lectures, is don't believe a single word of what I'm going to present here, because when you believe you build your house on rock, make sure it is, in sand, make sure that it is true, and only then you can integrate it into your the understanding you already have.
Excellent. Do you have any more insight into other passages that may have a similar hidden meaning?
Yeah, actually they all have. It's a kind of secret language. When they talk about water or wine or rock or anything, everything has a special meaning. It's coded, because we need to understand when it was written. It was written at the end of the 2nd century, when it was very dangerous to have this kind of information, so to say, in your back, because when you were caught, then you were seen as a heretic, as a threat to the Vatican, or to the powers that should not be in Rome, the Saturnian priesthood. So they would do anything to bring you down. So they had to find a very clever solution, and that's why they came up with this. It's actually coded messaging, and when you understand the code, then you can pass on the knowledge to others or to a next generation. That was the clever trick. But yeah, of course, in the end it was corrupted. But still, you see, if I read, for instance, Matthew or Luke or whatever, John is my favorite, by the way, then you see a lot of true insights there. And especially the start of the Gospel of John is so fascinating, because it gives you a quick summary of the whole of reality. It's the most profound insight. When you read the first verses of the Gospel of John, take some time to reflect on that, because you don't find it in the other Gospels, and it's showing us the nature of our reality. In the beginning, there was the Word, and so on.
Right. In the beginning was the Word. And that's what it all stems from. And I think when they say the Word, they mean the vibration, the frequency, the very essence and resonance of the universe.
Indeed. It starts with sound. And sound is also the only way to communicate through the ether field, which was also deleted by university scientism, thanks to Mr. Albert Einstein. He said it cannot exist, but actually all ancient insights tell us about the field. We are like fish swimming in water, and we don't know what water is. Well, the water we swim in is ether, and ether is everywhere. It's all surrounding. The vacuum, the so-called vacuum, is full with it. And ether is the fluid-like substance in which everything is communicated, and of course we can use that to send information directly. We don't need a mobile phone. If we tune into the frequency of somebody, we can give them directly information in their head, and they can hear it. It's like we produce sound inside the head of somebody else, inside the brain. So that's what it's trying to tell us. The sound is the way to communicate.
Wow. One passage that I find very interesting, and I do understand that the Bible is full of astro-theology, Luke 22:10, where he replies, as you enter into the city, well, first of all, let me put it in context. The disciples, according to the book, are asking, where do we meet you for the Passover? He says, as soon as you enter a city, a man carrying a jar of water will meet you. Follow him to the house which he enters in. And the man holding the jar of water, of course, sounds very much like Aquarius. And it sounds like the passing of an age, as opposed to some physical instructions that a man was giving to people.
Yeah, that's a very clear reference. I've been to Africa once, and you don't find any man carrying water there. At least I couldn't find it, and I don't think it's normal anywhere on this planet. So carrying water is actually a female task. And it's very remarkable that that passage is in the Bible, because it's a reference to a man carrying water. And we should go in the house of that man. That means the house of Aquarius. And that means the 11th house. And that has everything to do with the precession of the equinoxes, because we have every about 2,000 years, we enter a new kind of era. And actually it's 2,160 years, according to my research. That means that around the time these Gospels were written, actually, I can go into the word Gospel as well. But the main story is it started a little bit before what we now call the year 1. I think it was about 100 years before that. So that was all about the age of Pisces. And you find many references in the Gospels to Pisces. Actually, most of the parables, there is something related to Pisces, or fishermen or whatever, to fish and so on. So that was all referring to the sun, Helios, in the age of Pisces. And what will happen next is, of course, the sun will enter the house of Aquarius. And according to my research, that happened already in the year 2012. So we are now in that period, and that's very important because it's part of the Pisces and Aries. They are part of what is called the Iron Age, and now we're in the Bronze Age. So we are moving up, so to say. Then we get Silver Age, and finally there is the Golden Age. But it will take some time before we are there. But in the Bronze Age, we have a higher general understanding, a higher consciousness, so to say. That means that we can now reconnect to the insights of ancient Sumer and ancient Egypt, or you can call it also Kemet, the Black Land. That means that we are finally starting to understand what our ancient ancestors really meant, and that there was profound insights. And now we can understand why the ancient Egyptians were so fascinated with afterlife, because this temporal being in this reality is part of a much bigger game, so to say, and we should not focus on only this small part from birth to physical death. We should focus on the much bigger scale of our reality, and then we become truly servants of the light, so to say.
So what is the true meaning of the word gospel?
Actually, the ancient word is eu, it means good, and angel is also in there. Not good in pronouncing Greek words, but it's something like the good news. That's what it says. So they were bringers of the good news. That's what the gospel's all about. And that's a very clever way, because how can you ever be arrested for bringing the good news? It's a very smart way to to conceive it, because they don't say it's the news of the light, or it's about light consciousness. No, there's just good news, just like a gossip magazine with some good news inside or whatever. So that was the trick. And later on it was changed to gospel in English, but gospel actually comes from good, spell, and the word spell also has a different meaning. It can also be something negative. And good spell became actually God spell, and it was even further down shortened to gospel. But it's about good spell. And to me also spell is a strange word here, because it ends with EL, and EL is the ancient name for Saturn. So to me, gospel is actually a reference to Saturn, and I'm very not too happy about that hidden meaning there, because we shouldn't look at Saturn, we should look at the sun, because the sun is helping us to get the light consciousness.
So what is the truth behind the Saturn worshiper? Why the Saturn worshiping? Why do they keep pointing to Saturn, Saturn, Saturn?
They have to point to a real deity. They can make up a deity, but that's not really helpful. So there has to be a real deity, and Saturn is a real deity, because the deities, the gods, they are up in the sky. That's what all the ancient civilizations told us. The gods are up in the sky, or in heaven, so they are the wandering planets, together with the sun and the moon, with Helios and with Luna. So they had to pick one of those 7. That's where the 7 days of the week come from. We honor still our gods or our deities. So they had to pick one of those 7, and the one who is most down, most heavy, most black, is Saturn, and they want to do the very opposite of light, of gold, of shining. So that's why they chose Saturn. And there is much more to tell about Saturn as well, because it also emits a kind of special energy. There's more energy coming from Saturn to in our direction than it is reflected from the sun. Actually, they're all reflections of sunlight, but Saturn is adding his own energy to that as well. And I think somehow the people who want to control this world honor that, because Saturn is able to create structure, to rule over us, and that's what they want. They want to impose a structure on us to regulate life, and the best deity to do that is Saturn. Saturn is very strict, very harsh, so to say, and that's what they use. So that's why they honor Saturn. It has two benefits. First of all, it's the most cold, the most dark, the most lowest of them all. Yeah, when we look at alchemy tells us that we can develop from lead to gold. That's not literally. It's a metaphoric way to explain that we can develop from the lowest state of consciousness to the highest, and the lowest is represented by Saturn, and the highest by the sun, Helios. So that's why they chose Saturn, and it's also beneficiary for them, because they can use the energy of Saturn to put a structure on this world to create their order. Their new world order is based on the energy of Saturn.
Do you have any insight into the hexagram or hexagon on Saturn?
Yeah, Saturn, in the Kabbalah, the number of Saturn is 3. So that's why they make a lot of triangles. Yeah, all the artists, they make a triangle in front of their head, or what we see at the $1 USA bill, also a triangle there at the top of the pyramid. So the triangle is a reference to Saturn, but also the double triangle, the triangle pointing up and the triangle pointing down. And then you get what people call the Star of David or the Seal of Solomon, but it's actually an ancient symbol of Saturn, because Saturn has something to do with 6. That's why we now have the 6th day of the week, Saturn Day, the day of Saturn. And there's also something strange going on at the North Pole of Saturn, because there is a shape that has indeed 6 sides, and it's just not an accident. NASA has been there many times back, and they try at the beginning to somehow say that's just a coincidence, but the images can come back every time again. So there is a kind of stable 6-sided structure, a hexagonal structure, and of course, that's another reference to 6. So 6 is the number that is in holy science the number of the sun, Helios. But in this Saturnic worship, it's the number that is used for Saturn. So Saturn is 6.
Well, you know what I've noticed? I hate to cut you off there, but I've done astrology for the past 5 years, and I'm always blown away by how prevalent Saturn is in birth charts that I do of people who have a problem with authority getting in the way of their success all the time. And it's almost like this old grandfather figure that, gets in the way of your success and constantly cuts you off when you're trying to achieve a higher level of consciousness. And I'm also blown away by the fact that the symbol for Saturn in astrology is the exact same symbol that the church that I grew up with, the denomination of the church I grew up with, uses for their denomination. It is the Saturn symbol with the devil tail and everything. And I'm just blown away by that, because, this is a Pentecostal denomination that has a symbol of Saturn, aka Satan, on its thing, as its symbol. And I really think that goes back to this idea of, like you were saying, lead into gold. You start off at the very, very bottom of the barrel when it comes to consciousness, and that is the conservative Christianity at this point in time.
Yeah, but it's true. But they, as I said before, they do have to use a real deity because otherwise it's fake, and it will not work. So you have to worship something, but you also need to trick people. So people who are Christians, they think they worship the light, but in fact they are worshiping both Jupiter and Saturn. That's why it's the Jupiter square in Vatican. Yeah, we call it Saint Peter, but Saint Peter is actually a reference to Jew Peter. So
Oh, Jew Peter.
yeah, it's just a
Oh, I
word game.
never thought of that. It's a play on words.
Yes, yes, it is, and that's why it's also the Saint Peter's basilic and so on. And of course we know that the Pope is sometimes wearing his Saturn hat. It's a red hat. Red and black are the colors of Saturn. So, and also when we look at the Gospels, it's also described there, or maybe it's Revelations, I'm not sure which it is, but also the color purple is there. So, and then you see the people dressed up in the Vatican use those colors, black, purple, and red, all the time.
Yeah.
And the Pope,
yeah.
of course, is trying to fool us by using white, but we all know that it's not white. He's trying to to trick us. But it's all black there. It's very black.
Wow. Wow. Have you ever seen The Exorcist?
Yeah, when I was young. But the problem is, if you don't know, for instance, Holy Science, then those stories, those movies are just entertainment.
Right.
But the more I understand about Holy Science, the more the meaning comes there. Everything has a meaning. They're all programming, the subliminal or predictive programming. They use all kinds of tricks on us so that we are in a state of mind that can easily be influenced or controlled. But also what is also beautiful here, they need to tell us the truth. If they cannot fool us by not telling us the truth, because then it will backfire to the people that should not be in control. So they know this. They know that they have to tell us in advance what kind of dirty tricks they're gonna pull on us. But if they've done it in a clever way, for instance, by making a movie in such a way that we think it's only entertainment, but in fact they just told us this is what we're gonna do to you, and if you don't object, then that's exactly what will happen. So then the blame will be all on yourself, not on us. So that's also a way to look at everything Hollywood is producing. Hollywood comes, of course, from Holywood, means the wands of the wizards from past times. They're now using not a wooden wand anymore. They're using movies that we see in the cinema or at home or on our smartphone.
You know, I have to wonder though if some of these directors and some of these producers and some of these screenwriters are actually tapped into something higher up that's basically telling them to tell humanity the truth, even if a large portion of the people that watch this film are just going to be focused on how gross some parts are or how scary some parts are. And then there's going to be a portion that just runs out of the theater before half the movie is even over, you know, and then you have like the 10 or 15% that have a higher awareness of esoteric concepts that watch this and go, oh, wow, you know, that really means a lot. Like, wow, that's a good allegory.
Yeah, it's very clever. I have to admit that they are far from stupid. When we look at it, for instance, at Stanley Kubrick is one of my all-time favorite movie directors. I think this guy was genius, but he was very well aware of what the game was all about. And in the beginning, he just played along because he thought it was good for him. But at a certain moment, he got remorse. He was the one who directed the fake Apollo 11 moon landing, and he confessed that later on in The Shining, in his take on The Shining. And in the end, we all know that after Eyes Wide Shut was not even out there, he was murdered because he became a real liability to the powers that should not be. He was exposing their game too much, and that's what they didn't want.
Wow.
Well, with the Exorcist series, that's one that I would recommend going back and watching. We just watched the entire series the other day because we're working on a film, and it was part of research for this film that we're working on. But seeing it with these new eyes, it is a complete telling of the divine feminine being overrun by this dark energy and then ultimately rising again and regaining the power, especially when you get into the second one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's not on top of my mind, so it has been long since I've seen it. But I know it's true. Have you heard about the story about black goo?
The black goo, that came to my attention a couple of months ago, but I haven't really looked too far into it. So tell us about the black goo.
Yeah, well, I did a little bit of research too, not too much actually, but I got in contact with the German scientist who started this subject. But he said that a long time ago, he talks about 80,000. I think it's much earlier, but doesn't really matter. Some kind of alien stuff came into this world, which is able to assimilate life, to take over life forms, and to somehow control it. And I think that's where all the trouble started for us human beings, but also for animals. And I think before that, it was a kind of more paradise-like state on this planet. But after that, some evil consciousness entered this reality and started to mess up this whole place. And in the beginning, I thought this is a really silly science fiction story. But when you look at history, certainly things start to make sense. For instance, the Falkland War, and it's a small island down there in the South Atlantic Ocean, and it's called Thule. And we also know that the Germans were very interested. The Nazi Germans were very interested in that island. They actually had a Thule Gesellschaft, organization, society. So I think there is a lot of truth in here, and also the so-called oil spill incident that happened in the Gulf of Mexico is maybe also related to this. So they know there is some kind of black kind of oil-like substance, which is actually highly intelligent, and is what is really doing is trying to assimilate all life on this planet. They are what is called the Borg in the Star Trek series. Yeah, resistance is futile. You will be assimilated. And that's what they want. They want to assimilate all human beings. And that's why nowadays 99% in the Western world is looking at a smartphone all day long, because we already are part of that alien intelligence. AI can call it artificial intelligence, but you can also call it alien intelligence or artificial alien intelligence. And that also explains why there is such a boost in IT, information technology, because it's going so extremely fast. In how much years? 20 years, 30 years? It's going incredible speed. Right. And now we cannot unthink it anymore. It's part of our reality. But when I was a student, I was one of the few people who were using email, and I thought I was really ahead of things. But now, if you're using email, you're behind, because everybody's sending WhatsApp and things like that. So, it makes a lot of sense. That means that our reality has been invaded by a kind of alien intelligence, and that's trying to bring us further away from connecting with our mother Earth, our mother Terra, and trying to steer us away from our divine role, and making us kind of robots or systems that are not natural anymore. And that's what's really happening. We are becoming more and more disconnected from the natural world, which means the creation of God, and we are becoming more and more part of the artificial world, which you can call the creation of the devil, because there is also a relation between black goo and Saturn. So maybe the black goo is actually coming from Saturn, and it's Saturn consciousness that is trying to take over this planet.
That reminds me of, what is that film, Space Odyssey, where Saturn manifests these, I forget what it's called, the large black panels. I can't remember for the life of me for some reason.
The black monolith, you mean?
Monolith, that's
the
it.
Monoliths,
yeah,
right.
Yeah. It could be an allegory for the goo.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And also there is a black cube in Mecca, and at the corner, the east corner, there is a kind of meteorite that came from above, and it has to be kissed by the Muslims. So there are many stories relating to cube, to black, to monolith type of things. And of course, as I said before, Stanley Kubrick wasn't a really stupid man. He was extremely smart, and he gave us a coded message. He said, if you look carefully at that movie, people didn't understand it when it came out in 1968. But if you look at it now with our current understanding, he pictures the chimpanzees having harmony and peace until that monolith arrives, and then the trouble starts, then the first murder. And that theme keeps going over and over again. And he wanted to make a shot at Saturn, but technically that was impossible. That's the story they tried to sell us. I think that's nonsense, because he was able to create the illusion of a moon landing as well. So why was that not possible? I think they didn't want to direct attention to Saturn, and that's why they chose in the end Jupiter. But I think if you look with open eyes to this movie, then you see that Kubrick is really trying to tell us something. And recently I also did work on David Bowie and Space Odyssey and Space Oddity. I think there's a lot of information here trying to tell us.
Wow. Have you heard at all the idea that Hitler went down to Antarctica because that's the first place that this black goo was discovered? And shortly after World War II, all of the nations signed the Antarctic Treaty. And the reason for that is because the black goo existed down there, and so they wanted to make sure that nobody had access to it, or they had regulated access to it.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense, because why is it restricted, and why did all the countries agreed on this? So maybe they know it's very dangerous, and that's why they did it. Yeah, we know that he didn't die. Adolf Hitler didn't die, of course, in the bunker in Berlin. He escaped and he went to live for long in
Argentina.
I think it was, yeah. So and the Thule organizational society is real, and you can still look it up what they did. So it makes a lot of sense. And it's total secrecy what happens in Antarctica down at the South Pole. And I think it's probably true.
Absolutely fascinating. Now, you talk about who the human beings really are and what the nature of the spirit and the soul is. I know we touched upon this earlier, but can you elaborate a little more on that?
Yeah, there's a lot of confusion here, because most people think that the spirit is just the mind and the soul is just the heart, but that's completely wrong. Actually, the spirit and the soul are a much higher level. They are pure metaphysic. While you can also say mind and heart are already beyond the physical reality, which is true, but the spirit and the soul are even further away from that as well. You can call the spirit and the soul part of the source. Actually, the spirit is our ability to develop higher thinking, and the soul is our ability to develop higher feeling. But higher feeling uses a lot of more subtle energies than normal feeling. Normal feeling is, you can call it like crude petroleum, while the gasoline you put in your car, which is refined a lot, that is more subtle, and that's why your car can use that, but not crude petroleum. And the same is true for our spirit. So you need to develop your inner energies, your subtle energies, to a higher level in order to be able to fuel your higher thinking, your spirit. And only when you've done that, then you are becoming a true man, a true human being, or I call it a holy man, holy with W-double-L. But as long as people still think that the soul is just your feeling and your mind is just your spirit, or your spirit is just your mind, you will never get there. You need to climb the inner ladder. You have to ascend energetically to a higher level in order to contact your soul and in order to develop the contact with your spirit.
So how do people go about doing that?
Yeah, first of all, you need to, the first step is connect with your soul. And we need to understand where our soul is coming from. Our soul came from the earth, from down under, so to say, from the core of our home planet, from our mother. So we need to connect with our mother in order to reach our soul, in order to be able to make contact with our soul. And that means becoming more in harmony with natural life, natural way of living, natural feeding, natural habits, and so on. Becoming more natural. That's the best way. And of course, meditation will help, and understanding your personality will help, and so on. It's all about knowing thyself. Yeah, like the ancient Greek wrote down at the top of the entrance of the temple. If you know yourself, then you can connect with your soul. But that's just the first part. Actually, what we now call spirituality is actually a wrong word, because it should be called like something like solidity or whatever. But it has to do with the soul, not with the spirit. So all we find at the level of spirituality, including the pure aspects of religion, they are all related to our soul. So then we become in touch with our soul, and then we need to develop our mind. Our mind has to be trained. It's like mental fitness. Most people, especially in the New Age community, they think, well, we shouldn't do anything with our left hemisphere because it's just old stuff. We don't need that. We only focus on our feeling, and that's how we do business from now on. Well, that's a really big mistake, because then you are not able to develop your mind. And if you don't develop your mind, you will never be able to reach your spirit, because your spirit is actually there, but it's not connected. It's waiting for us to connect, but you need to do a lot of inner work in order to be able to make that connection. Actually, we are all born like virgins, and virgin means we only have a mother, and the mother is the soul, and our father is the spirit. And the whole story about Jesus having a virgin birth is about us. We are born with a soul, but not with a spirit. The spirit is already there, but it's not connected. And the only way to connect with your spirit is to develop your mental capacities and making your insights higher and higher until you finally reach it. And that's the whole purpose of holy science. It's kind of mental fitness to develop the highest insights in order to reach the spirit.
You know, I hear a lot about meditation, but I haven't had too much positive experience. I mean, sure, I've had a little bit of experience with meditation, and some of it has been positive, but I really find entheogens are really the path to really unlock a lot of those doors. Meditation is kind of like a bicycle, where entheogens would be like getting into a rocket ship.
Yeah, you can also compare it to a radio station like we have now. And which frequency are you tuning into? Most people who are doing meditation are not aware that they are using a kind of radio device to tune into something. They don't know what they're tuning into. And the same is with channeling. And the black goo is, of course, very smart, very clever. So most people who are channeling or meditating, they tune into that consciousness, the consciousness of the alien intruder that wants to rule this planet. So you should be careful. I'm also very skeptic about a lot of meditation, and I only do active meditation, meaning qigong and exercises, because I don't put my antenna into a direction which I don't know. So why should I listen to a broadcast which I don't know the broadcaster, where it's coming from?
Right. Do you have any experience with ayahuasca or any other entheogens?
Not yet, but I did an interview with a woman who was very into that. She doing it for 17 years or something, and the stories are really appealing to me. But it's the same here. You open up a frequency, you open up a channel, and the big question is, what are you letting in? And since I'm not 100% certain of that that technique, I don't use any kind of artificial stuff. I just do it on my own mental capacity. So I don't use any drugs. I don't use even alcohol or, of course, sugar. I mean artificial sugar, and so on, because I want to stay as pure as possible. I want to do it on my own, in my own way, not by using a kind of trick. That's how it feels to me.
Wait, can you repeat that? You don't want to use ayahuasca because it feels like using a trick?
Yeah, well, you use a kind of drugs. It's like you're an athlete and you want to win the golden medal, but you're using drugs to attain that goal. So to me, that's not fair. You should
but you can't get to the moon by jumping up and down.
That's true. That's true. At least not in the physical world. But it's just my take on this. I don't judge anybody. I'm non-judgmental on all those things. Everybody should do what they think is good. But for me, using these, I know it's natural substance, but as I said before, I'm opening up my pineal gland, and I'm not sure what I'm allowing to go in to my to the core of my brain, and as long as I'm not sure about that, I don't open the door.
Well, according to Dr. Rick Strassman and Dr. Edie Frexka, who we've had on the show before in the past, and Edie's actually a really good friend of ours, DMT is something that you release in your brain anyway, whenever you're dreaming and in near-death states and when you're born. And then when you finally do die, you have one last surge of DMT production and it doesn't actually occur. They think it occurs in the lungs, actually, primarily, and then it goes straight to the brain from there, and then goes to the pineal, and then that's where you see the fireworks, visuals, and that kind of thing. And so you're not adding anything to it except what you already have. And that's the beauty of it is it is so unbelievably safe that when somebody smokes it, for instance, the visions subside within 5 to 10 or 15 minutes. It is that your brain is that okay with DMT. And you compare that to anything else that people smoke. I mean, crack cocaine. And, it destroys the brain. And the brain doesn't know what to do with it. And that's why you see so many bad side effects from it. But when you're talking about ayahuasca, especially, I think it would benefit you maybe to read about the ancient Egyptians and how they used to drink brews all the time that have been surmised to have acacia nicolita in them. Also, there are certain frescoes in Egypt that seem to show people drinking from acacia trees and actually drinking from them and then being turned into birds by goddesses. And then you have the kykeon from ancient Greece that was said to make people change and see the world differently. And it was offered to pretty much everybody in ancient Greece. You were allowed to use the kykeon, but it wasn't forced upon anybody, but it was free for slave or for free man to use to expand your consciousness. And that's also surmised to have been some sort of acacia blend. So, I mean, this goes back thousands and thousands and thousands of years, and not just in the Amazon.
Well, it goes back, I think, to what we were talking about in the first hour. People are on different journeys and different paths.
Right.
And so some of them are here to be like Buddhist monks and just be observers. Others are here to be active. Others, there's a different place where everybody's at. So I think Brap mentioned in the chat room, there is no one direction or the other direction.
Right.
I feel like discounting the tools that Mother Nature and Earth has given us is something we need to get away from, because we've done that for the last several hundred years. As a matter of fact, that's the number one thing that the religions do, is tell you stay away from anything that nature has provided for you. Don't elevate your consciousness. Don't shift. Stay far away from spirituality, especially through the use of sacred plants that are here for obviously a particular reason. So I think that it's key to go back to using them, because over the last 1,000 years, not using them hasn't really done very good for humanity.
I fully agree to what you say, and maybe you should watch my television episode. I had a television program For 2 hours, I interviewed this woman, and she said a very interesting and I think important information there. But the point I'm making here is I only use techniques or substances that I fully understand. And I know it's 100% natural, but to me it still feels like I'm cheating my own spiritual development. And I don't want to do that. I want to take it step by step. And if I look at my journey from the moment I stopped working for the system, I decided to resign my job, and I decided to stop paying taxes and so on, and become off the grid. From that moment on, my development has taken such a huge progress. It's incredible. So I'm really happy with the progress I'm already making, and there's no urge or need in me to make it even go faster. So that's why I was saying. And as again, I don't know exactly what I'm opening up to, because there are many stories of people who get entities after using these kind of energies, because you're actually opening up to a higher reality, and that's beautiful. But it also has a backside that you can also allow entities or demons or whatever you like to call them in your own energy system.
But just to be fair though, isn't that thinking fear-based and something that we need to get away from?
Well, the woman I interviewed, she actually can see them. I cannot see them, but she sees them, and she says there are sometimes 5 inches, 6 inches in diameter. They're kind of black spheres, and she's able to remove them from people. She sees them, and she uses kinds of techniques to make them uneasy. Then they start to become annoyed, and then she can detect them and remove them from people. And I've heard, I cannot see them myself or detect them in any way, but I've heard this from many other people as well, that most people are carrying these kind of energies with them, and those energies feed off of unaware people.
The ethereal body. I remove those energies as well. I'm very familiar with what she's talking about. I haven't heard the interview, obviously, but it's really resonating with me. If she's seeing the same type of entities, I call them astral parasites, and they come in many forms. They're little bugs. Some of them look like little ladybugs, and others look a little bit bigger, more fleshy-like, and more like locusts than anything else. And then you get a higher progression of rogue spirits that are disembodied, and then spirits that are just purely evil and demonic. But there's also a lot of positive energies out there as well. But the number one thing to remember, though, is that we are the creators. We are the divinity. We are the divine. And therefore, we are the ultimate power. They do what we say, not the other way around. And so fearing them only feeds into their energy structure. It gets to a point to where you can expel any of these energies without any problem whatsoever. And I feel, just by feeling your resonance and feeling your energy, that's a path that I think you should explore. I mean, of course, that's only my opinion, but I think that there's so much more potential there, and you can really unlock that potential if you remove the fear.
Yeah, no, it's not just fear. It's just to me it seems like not fair. But after that interview with her, I had the same conclusion you reached. Now I reached then too. So I have to, one weekend or something, I have to break free from my very busy work and do this and just experience it. But
it is just something to consider, something to meditate on. Maybe you needed to hear that in your path, or maybe it's not a path, because I agree it's not a path for everybody. Right. We talk about it extensively here on the show, but that's because that's our particular path, and we're taking people on our journey, and everybody has a different journey for sure. You talked about living off grid though. And that's something that a lot of people want to get into. So how do they begin to live off grid? Like, what are the first steps?
It has to do with insight. We know the saying, the truth will set you free. Well, you need to know the truth about what is called legislation or law, or what the government tries to tell us, which the law is. Because when you delve into this, which I've done, then you will understand that it's all trickery. And to me, it's all even unlawful, because to me, there's only one law, and those are what people call the Ten Commandments. But actually, that is also a little bit corrupted by the Vatican and the Jewish Pharisees as well. But in essence, they are 10 precepts, and if you apply those 10 precepts, then nobody can ever harass you anymore. You can only allow people to harass you, but if you don't, which I do not, then you will become truly free. But the first thing is that you have to realize that you are not a legal fiction, because most people think that they are their name and they are their number or the social security number or whatever. But those numbers are something that you have, or somebody tried to tell you that you have them. But actually, it's not your true. You're not a true owner of it. Actually, when you identify yourself with that legal fiction, that people call a natural entity, which is not, of course, it's only on paper, it's paper based. But if you identify with that name and with that number, then you are part of that paper based control system. And then they can push you around, and they can give you fines, and they can even lock you up and things like that. But if you say, I am not that, I am a creation of God, and I am part of the natural world, I'm not part of the paper-based fictional world, then that's the way out. People try to find ways within the legal system. They try to send letters, and they claim their sovereignty and things like that. But that's all. I did it myself too, but it was just fun, and it was good for my development. But in the end, I realized if you still think you can solve your problem with sending letters, then you have not really understand the game, because the game is all about trickery. The legal system is all trickery. It's a kind of stage, and if you step into that stage, then you become part of that. But they play upon you. And before you know, you bear the consequences of it. You should never get aboard of that ship, because it's actually a ship. And when you enter that ship, you have to listen to the captain, and the captain tells you what you can and cannot do. But if you refuse to enter that ship, then nobody can do anything.
That's why it's all maritime law.
Exactly. So you can go into all that, but I brought it back to the basics, and the basics are just the original 10 commandments. And I have a video in which I explain that in full depth, but it has nothing to do with punishment or reward. It's just, if you follow those 10 precepts, then you are inherited to the legacy which God left for every man that is serving God, and that's ruling over this world, this planet. So you can become a good shepherd, but that means that you first have to repent in a good way, meaning that you have to realize that the 10 commandments are the only guideline for you in this life. And if you follow those 10 precepts, then you become truly free. Yeah, for instance, the second commandment is that you cannot make a graven image, but it's not a literal graven image. It means that you cannot copy anything that God made. And God made also the 10 commandments, which is the law. So you cannot copy the law. If you obey, for instance, the law of the USA or any state in the USA, then you actually violate the second commandment, because God has copyright on the principle of law. And
I've never heard it put that way, but that's a great way to put it.
That's a great way to put it, actually.
Yeah, but it's people think it's a joke, but it's the very truth. And so I can explain all 10 of them. And that's the only way to become free. I've seen all the movements, all the everybody's trying to free themselves in one way or the other, but the only freedom comes from within, from understanding. That's why it says the truth will set you free, because if you really fully understand this truth and you live this truth, then you are a free man. Then you are a holy man.
Wow. So can you break down some of the other commandments for us?
Well, of course, then we start at the top. The top is that you should honor God as the first, meaning, it's not about jealousy or any silly thing like that. It's that God is actually the creator of the natural world. And if you see God as the creator, that God is the first thing, that there is nothing before the first thing, which is God, then you understand how everything is created. God is the word which everything originates from. And if you don't think God is one, but for instance you think you are yourself one, or maybe something else, maybe the devil is one, then you of course violate number one, the commandment one. And you not get punished if you violate the first commandment. What you just do is you disconnect yourself from the creation of God. And by disconnecting yourself, you create all kinds of problems for yourself. The second one is don't mess with the creation of God. Don't copy it. For instance, Monsanto, a company we all know, is trying to violate that every possible way, and trying to create a kind of artificial life, which is a very severe violation of this principle. The third one is do not put God in front of your own business. Actually, the second one is saying don't mind God business, and the third one is mind your own business. Most people try to pray to God and say, "Oh God, please buy me a Mercedes-Benz or whatever." But the third commandment is just doing your own business. So when you pray to God and you ask for all kinds of favors, then you violate the third commandment. But if you curse and you use kind of all kinds of harsh words, then it's not a violation of the third word, only if it is not asking God to bring you to damnation or something. So if you don't mean it literal, then you can curse all you want. It's your business. It's energetically not really good, of course, because you create all kinds of negative effects. But it's not a violation of the third commandment. And then the fourth one is about the father and the mother. And of course, we know that the mother is the planet we live on. That's not we don't talk about here the biological mother. It's about spiritual mother, and that's of course the planet. I call her Cheree, or you can also call her Gaia. And the father is the Father who art in heaven. And most people think that is God. Well, that's not God. God is beyond that. The Father who art in heaven is the sun Helios. So if we honor the sun and the planet we are living upon, then our days will be longer, of course, because then we live natural, and natural people live longer than people who do all kinds of unnatural stuff, unnatural feeding, unnatural habits, and so on. But it has a double meaning, because the father is also the spirit and the mother is also the soul. So if we honor also our spirit and our soul, then also we are longer at this planet, because we have something. Our role is not played out yet. So we have something to do here. Nobody came here by chance or by accident. We have a certain role to play, and that's why we are here. We chose that before we came here, but when we arrived as a little baby, we forgot all about it. And it takes us a few years, sometimes very long, and some people even remember it at the end of their lives. But hopefully around 30, 40, most people realize what they are here for. And then the fifth one is it has nothing to do with working or the seventh day. Actually, it's about the seventh heaven, because if you read the chapter 1 of Genesis carefully, then Holy Science tells you it's about 7 layers or 7 levels of consciousness, or the 7 hierarchies of the reality. And the highest level is the seventh heaven, and that's the heaven of God. And that's the heaven that was not created, because it started at the day before the creation, and that's God's day 0. And then the creation starts at day 1, and so on. So it's about honoring the 7th day, because the day 0 is also the day 7. So it's honoring the highest level of creation, meaning the level of God, or the 7th heaven of God. And it has nothing to do with not working on a Sunday or a Sabbath day or whatever. It's completely misunderstood. It actually says, the 5th commandment, work your consciousness up to the 7th heaven.
Wow. I don't mean to cut you off, Johan, but we are at the end of the show. I just want to say thank you very much. This has been absolutely fascinating. I'm really resonating with a lot of the things that you said. Please give us your websites one more time, and where people can tune into the radio show, pick up any books, etc.
Yeah, the English website is holyscience.org, holy WLL. And I have another website which has more information, but a little bit difficult, is pateo.nl. And there you can buy my ebooks and see all my videos.
Excellent. Thank you so much for your time this evening. Ladies and gentlemen, kiss the one you love right now. You never know when the last time is going to be. Stay tuned. Much more coming up right here on truthfrequencyradio.com. Your protection from deception.